Today's stuff we're going to be learning is Bava Kamma Daf Lamed Hey. This week's learning, the week of Hanukkah, is sponsored by Michael Fishbane, Eitan Fishbane, and Alicia Russ Fishbane and their families in honor of Mona. Happy Hanukkah. We're also proud of you and your devoted commitment to Daf Yomi. We're going to get started now with our Mishna. We'll just quickly review the Mishna without reading it inside. We started with this Mishna which compared the same actions done by a shore and a person, an animal or a person. Sometimes you could have the same action where the animal will be liable, the person will not. Or obviously the owner of the animal, not the animal, but the owner will be liable and the person will not, and likewise the reverse. The cases we're going to focus on right now, the reverse is pretty simple. Basically, you're going to have the shore is not liable for boshet that it causes, for any embarrassment it causes to somebody. So if a shore embarrasses someone by damaging them, they're only liable for damages. They're not liable for the embarrassment, whereas a person will be liable for embarrassing somebody. And the other issue we saw was that a shore that blinds an eved, we did this very quickly at the end, so I didn't really get into the details, but I'll review this, which is if a master blinds his eved or knocks his arm, breaks his arm, the eved, this is an eved kanani, immediately goes free. So what we mean here by chayav means chayav, he has to release the slave. If a shore does it, okay, it would be the shore basically gores and knocks the arm, breaks the arm of his master's slave, then the slave doesn't go free. That's what it means, patur. So there's another difference. Now we're going to move to the cases where a person is not liable for the same thing that a shore would be liable for, which seems counterintuitive, but once we learn why, we see why it's really not counterintuitive, because it's actually much more severe when a person does it. For example, hits his parents and causes an injury, like blood comes out. So that we'll get to in one of the later prakim in Sanhedrin, but that they're liable, the death penalty. And someone who burns someone's field on Shabbat is liable the death penalty. Once you're liable the death penalty, we have what's called kimle b'derabba mineh. We say that you're only liable for the more severe, even if, right, what's interesting is, even if you don't get the punishment of the death penalty because you did something that you could have gotten the death penalty, you're actually exempt for the payment. Okay, this is when you do it all in the same action. We're going to deal with this topic much more in depth. We're going to see where we get it from. This is going to come up in other sugyot. So today it's like the first, we have seen this before. We're going to see a few things today that are kind of the first learning of these sugyot within many times. We're going to see them over and over again. So again, this is a good example of, we won't get to everything today about all these topics, but we will over time cover the things. So for example, there's two different psukim where you could learn it from, and that affects there's all sorts of nafkamina from it, but not for today. So Tani Rabbi Avau Kamei to Rabbi Yochanan. We're starting where it says Gemara at the bottom of Lamed Dalet Amud Bet. Kol amikalkalim pturin. Okay, this is something we learned in Masechet Shabbat. If you destroy something, you do a destructive act on Shabbat, you're actually exempt. Because, and this we learned not so long ago, when we learned Adam muad olam, and we had that sugya about Melechet Machshevet Asrat Torah, it's only productive, creative actions that you're liable for on Shabbat. So, for example, one of the Lamed Melachot, some of them are destructive, like sotel, to break a building, or to mochek, to erase letters. But it's mochek amanat lichtov. You're erasing so that you can write new letters. You're breaking something so that you can rebuild it, right? The first stage always of building a new house, right? If you're taking an old house and building it, you tear down the first house. So that would be a destructive act that's creative. If you're doing it just to destroy something, then it's not considered creative. Obviously, there's a big, what does creative mean? You can get into a whole thing, and this is what we're going to talk about now. So comes Rabbi Avau, he brings this braita before Rabbi Yochanan, and the braita says, Kol mekalkalim pturim, except there's two big exceptions to the rule. Chutz michover umavir, other than two malachot. Okay, one is to be chover. That's not actually a malacha, and it's a big debate what it's a tolada of. But if you cause someone to bleed, some people say it's a tolada of shochet, of slaughtering, because you're taking out part of someone's soul by making them bleed. Some people think it's sovea because of the color of the blood. Some people think it's dash because you're taking, dash is to thresh. You're taking the wheat from the chaff. So here you're taking the blood out from the body. There's different opinions about what exactly the malacha is, but that is a destructive act that you're actually going to be liable for. And so is mav'ir. Well, havarat esh, the whole malacha, is in and of itself a destructive act. So these are two exceptions to the rule. To which Rabbi Yochanan says, one of my favorite lines, Puk tene levava. Go teach that braita outside, meaning there is no place for this braita in my Beit Midrash. You are wrong. You are so wrong that go take your braita outside and don't teach it here. And I always like it because it shows passion, right? How much he's so strong about his opinions, which, could be good and bad, but it's just always a fun line. Now, chovel umavir ena Mishna. He says you're just not right. It's not correct. Chovel and mavir is not an exception to the rule. They're just like anything else. They're destructive acts. And he says, imtim talomar Mishna, if you want to say they are part of, you can be liable for them, well, chovel b'tzarich lekabo, mavir b'tzarich la'afro, there has to be something positive about them. So someone could injure someone for a destructive reason, and they will be liable and get the death penalty if they need the blood for their dog. They want to give the blood to the dog. I don't know. I don't have a dog, but I don't know what the deal with blood to a dog is. But it was something maybe they would feed their dogs. Or mavir v'tzarich la'afro, if you want the ashes and you need the ashes for something, then it turns it into a productive act, and then you will be liable in Shabbat. But anything less than that, no. If it's just destructive, you will not be liable. To which the Gemara says, wait a minute, how could you say that? Look at our Mishnah. Our Mishnah raises a question with Rabbi Yochanan. Tanan, shoroshi l'ketagadish b'Shabbat chayav, v'hushi l'ketagadish b'Shabbat patur. Now, how do we know it's not because you need the ashes? Because we compared it to a shore. Now, a shore, when he burns, right, lights a fire, he's not doing it to need the ashes, or maybe he is, we'll get to that later, but right now we're going to assume a shore doesn't have need for ashes. So, and we're comparing a human doing something to an animal doing something. V'katani hu dumia de shoro. It must be he is similar to the shore, because he does it in the same way. We're comparing apples to apples, not apples to oranges. So, mashalo de lo kabayle, just like a shore, burns to be destructive and not because they're trying to create ashes. Afunami de lo kabayle, it must be the person also doesn't need them. And then what do you see here? The Mishna says, itchayev benafsho, nacham v'katani patul, mipnei shu nidon benafsho. And it says you're exempt because you're nidon benafsho, because you get the death penalty. Now, according to Rabbi Yochanan, this isn't a malacha at all. So we're going to have to figure this out. We're going to have two possible answers. So right now the Gemara answers, lo shoro dumia dide. We're going to not say the human does it in the same way the shore does it. We're going to say the shore does it in the same way the human does it. And just like the human does it for the ashes, the shore also does it for the ashes. So I did tell you we were going to get to this in a minute, and then we're going to figure out how could that possibly be. Mahu de kabayle, just like he burned this. So now we're going to read the Mishnah. He burned a haystack, because he wanted the ashes. And likewise, the shore burned the haystack because he wanted the ashes. The shore will have to pay damages. The person will not. Now, because the person was liable for Shabbat, because he did it on Shabbat. So, shoro hechem ishkachala. How could you have a shore that needs ashes? What does a shore need ashes for? It was an intelligent shore. Okay, we're now going to distinguish between intelligent shores and non-intelligent shores. We already have met non-intelligent shores where with the gachelet, remember, you put the coal on them. We don't expect the shore to know to run away and remove the coal. That's a not so smart shore. But here we're talking about a shore who understands. What do they understand? He got bitten on his back. And he wants to burn this haystack. And he wants to roll in the ashes. He knows, he's smart enough to know that ashes will help the wound. And therefore, he's burnt this haystack in order to create ashes, in order to roll around in the ashes. So the first question is, how do we know? In other words, we want to come up with a case where the shore did it for the ashes and the human did it also for the ashes. And if the human does it for the ashes, he's liable because of Shabbat. He's going to be exempt from damages. How would we know that the animal is doing it for the ashes? The animal can't tell us. So this is obvious. The batar de kalye, after he burnt it, after the shore burnt the haystack, he rolled around in the ashes. So it became pretty clear from his actions what he was actually intending. Okay, but what's the second question, which is, is there such a thing that a shore will do such a thing, that a shore is intelligent enough to do this kind of thing? To which they answer, yeah. And in fact, we're going to bring you proof from the shore of Rav Papa. Dahu Torah, Dahava Be Rav Papa, there was a shore in Rav Papa's house. Dahava Kaiven Lechinke, he had a toothache. Ayel Upatke Leniziata, Veshate Shifra. He went in, opened the seal on the barrel of wine, drank the beer, not wine, the beer, drank some beer and was relieved of his pain, okay, and healed himself. So we see this case, first of all, as far as I remember, pretty sure I'm right about this, that Rav Papa was a beer brewer. So it makes sense that, he knew all about beer. And I guess his shore was smart enough to know that basically he on his own figured out how to deal with the pain he was suffering with. So here we see an example that some shvachim are smart enough, and that would be the way to understand the Mishnah. Again, it's not a simple reading of our Mishnah. Our Mishnah seemed to be just kind of plain and simple, a shore that burns something, a person who burns something. But in order to fit in with Rabbi Yochanan, we have to explain it this way. One last thing before we get to the second answer. Amar Rabbanan kamei de Rav Papa, mimatzit amrat shoro dumiyadidei, v'hakatan. How could you say the shore is like a person and does it like a person? That, in other words, this Mishnah, we're assuming the shore does it just like the human would do it. So if the human does it for the ashes, and the shore also. V'hakatane, but look at the Mishnah. The Mishnah gives an example. Shoro shebiyesh patul, v'hu shebiyesh chagav. If the shore embarrasses someone, the owner will be exempt from the damages. If a person embarrasses someone, they'll be liable for the damages. Now, a shoro dumia didei nitkaven levayesh hechem ishkachala. Could there be a shore that wants to humiliate a person? That's not something a shore would know to do. The shore doesn't understand what it means even to embarrass someone, right? Maybe they want to damage, but not to embarrass. That doesn't make any sense. To which they answer, kegon shenitkaven lahazik. Now, what we meant here is, if the shore intended to damage or the human intended to damage. And we learned this already. Da'amar nitkaven lahazik apa pi shalon nitkaven levayesh. We learned this not so long ago. Daf kaf, forget what it's, kaf vav or zayin, about Adam muad la'olam. And we said that when you're intending, remember we talked about the differences between who pays what, and that there's no boshet in a case where you didn't even intend to damage, where it was, the rock fell and damaged someone, you don't pay the boshet. Because in order to pay boshet, what do you need? You need intent to damage. Now, you don't need intent to humiliate or intent to embarrass. So a shore can have intent to damage, that for sure. We know that. A shore can come violently and try to hurt somebody. But they won't be liable for humiliation payment, whereas a human who intends to damage someone will be liable for boshet and that. So that's a side question that we resolve. So that was one answer to Rabbi Yochanan, that it must be that the case is b'tzarich la'afro. And the shore would have to be like the person, and somehow we figured out that we could make this work. Rava gives a different example. Matnitim b'shogeg. The Mishnah is talking about a case of shogeg. Uchiditani de bechizke. Now, it's not exactly a case of shogeg. We're going to talk about this soon, what this means. Uchiditani de bechizke. It's going to be like a case of shogeg. Okay, and what are we going to say? Ditani de bechizke. Makeh adam umakeh be'ema. Okay, there's a pasuk that says, let's read the pasuk, Vayikra chapter 24, verse 21. Umakeh behema yishamena. If you hurt an animal, you will pay damages. Umakeh adam yumat. And if you hurt a person, you will die. Obviously, it means you hurt a person and kill them. Otherwise, you wouldn't die for it. Now, they say we're comparing hitting a person and hitting an animal. Mamakeh behema. Now, we're comparing them in a bit of an interesting manner, not what you would have expected. Mamakeh behema. If you hit an animal, this is right. You're responsible for your actions, whether you were intentional or non-intentional about it. Right, whether it was accidental, you didn't know it was forbidden to do, or you didn't know, right, or you intended. You tried to injure them, or you didn't even try to injure them. You were doing something else, but you injured them anyway. This is whether it was on the way up or on the way down. This is a catchphrase for something we're going to learn about Ir Miklat, that only in one of those scenarios, we're going to go to Ir Miklat if you killed b'derech yirida, but not if it was b'derech aliyah. But here it doesn't matter whether it was you threw something up, you threw something down. It doesn't make a difference, or you were going up and you fell. Either which way, lepatron mamon ela lechaybo mamon, meaning there's no difference, and you're not going to be exempt in any of these cases, but you will be liable in all these cases. Af makeh adam. Now here we're going to make a bit of a jump here. When you hit a person, we're going to have the same. Doesn't matter this, that. Okay, you kill somebody. Lo tachlok ben shogeg lemezid. Well, you already know we do differentiate between a person who kills intentionally and non-intentionally, so that's not where we're going. Ben mitkaven l'she'eno mitkaven, whether you intended or didn't intend. bein derech yirida lederech aliyah, which we will actually differentiate if it was accidental, l'chayvo mamon ela lepotro mamon, meaning in all these cases, even though only in half of them, right, one side of them, will you, or depending on which one, okay, forget the derech aliyah and derech yirida, but you won't necessarily get the death penalty, right? If you kill someone b'shogeg, you're not going to get the death penalty. You'll go to the refuge city. If you kill someone without intent, you also won't get the death penalty. But yet, in all those cases, you're going to be exempt from monetary payment. Because what they're saying here, and then you have to make a big jump, which we're going to go with Rashi on this, even though it's a huge jump to Rashi, and Rabbi Yochanan Tosfot kind of understand a little differently. I don't want to confuse you too much, so I'm going to stick with Rashi, but tell you that the problem is they try to resolve it. Again, they have their own weaknesses. But what we're going to say is, just like if you're shogeg about something, then then you won't get the death penalty. You've still done an act that if you had done it intentionally, you would have been liable to death penalty. So therefore, we're going to exempt you from payment, even though there is no death penalty here. How does that relate to us, Rabbi Yochanan? Because mav'ir, even though only when sarich la'afro, and you need the ashes, are you going to be actually liable to death penalty? If you do it without that, you will still get exempt from the payment, even though there's no death penalty. The weakness is, Rabbi Yochanan doesn't even think it's a malacha. Shogeg, I'll give you an example of shogeg, right? Shogeg, let's say for Shabbat would be, I didn't know it was Shabbat today. Okay, like I don't know, if you want to relate it to something now, right? Take the people who are in captivity. They have no idea what day it is, right? So if they're doing malacha on Shabbat, that's shogeg. They have no clue what, the hostages don't know what day is what, so they don't know what day is Shabbat. So basically, we're going to say now, a person like that does a malacha. Well, since if they had done it intentionally, they would get the death penalty, so they'll be exempt from payment if they cause damage at the same time. But, right there, yes, there's other cases, Becky, you're pointing out, it could be you didn't know it was a malacha, you didn't know it was forbidden on Shabbat, all sorts of things. But that's shogeg. But here, you actually didn't even do a malacha, according to Rabbi Yochanan. But somehow Rashi thinks they're comparing it anyway, because it's still the action of burning in theory, could be something that you'd be liable to death penalty for. Because of that difficulty, that it's not exactly a fair comparison. There's a different way of understanding the sugya, but we'll leave it at that. If you want to read, you can read up on it. In Rabbi Yochanan, he has a better Tosfot says it, but very short. Rabbi Yochanan has a little more in depth. Anyway, that's a weakness in the Rashi's interpretation, but that's basically where we get to. So we have two possible answers. We have one answer that we saw before. It's you do really need the ashes, and instead of saying the person is like the shore, we're going to say the shore is like the person. And just like a person could do it for the ashes, the shore can also do it for the ashes. And that we explained how that could be. Or we say it's like Chizkiah, who says basically your mitchayev b'nafsho, the mitchayev b'nafsho is very loose. It means as long as theoretically your action could have led in some way to a chiyuv mita, a death penalty, therefore we're going to exempt you from payment even then. Okay, and that's from this comparison of makeh be'emat to makeh adam. Amrule Rabbanan leRava mimatzim mukmei lebishogeg v'hamipnei shenidom b'nafsho katani. But how could you say it's shogeg? It says mipnei shehu mitchayev b'nafsho. The Mishna says because you are liable to death penalty. It sounds like you're really liable to death penalty. To which they say hachi kamar. What it means to say is like this: kevan dibemezi nidon b'nafsho. Since if you did it intentionally, you would be nidon b'nafsho. V'hechidami, what would be the case? Tikabai laflo. Right, you would need to do it, number one, with intention. Number two, where you needed it for the ashes. So therefore, hashta b'shogeg patur. Okay, this is where the weakness in Rashi comes. It says hashta b'shogeg patur. It should say hashta without needing the ashes, you're patur. There's something a little confusing about the words here, but Rashi still thinks that that's what it means. And what it means is, even if you don't really need the ashes and you're not really going to be liable, we're still going to treat you as if you're still going to be exempt from the payment. So our structure for right now is we had a Mishna with these cases that compared human action to animals' actions, where we're going to have cases where one is liable and the other is not in both directions. The human case where you're not liable, even though humans should be more liable than animals, it is because you're more liable. And because you're more liable, you're going to end up with a death penalty rather than the payment. You're going to be exempt from the payment, which again is a big sugya we're going to discuss in other cases when we see it head on. Notice the words kimle b'derabamine don't even appear here. But mitchayev v'nafsho is kind of the catchphrase for it. Well, you're liable to death, so therefore you won't have to pay. Then we said, what about this Rabbi Yochanan, who says you're not liable on Shabbat for burning. So we had two possible answers about how to resolve Rabbi Yochanan with our Mishna. Now we're going to move on to suffix cases. We have all sorts of cases. And this is, again, like I said before, I introduced by saying we have a lot of topics here where we're just going to start touching the surface of them, which is now we have a lot of issues of not clear facts about the case. So we have a case, Shiur Shaya, we're going to have a slew of cases in the Mishna where we're not clear who's liable what. So the scene is, what we do know is there's one shiur running after another shiur. And the shiur who's being chased is damaged. So the one whose shiur got damaged says, look, it was your shiur. Now, nobody saw exactly how the shiur got hurt. So the nizak, okay, let's go back to Ruth and Naomi. So Naomi says, hey, Ruth, your shiur attacked my shiur. That's how he got damaged. Ruth says, what are you talking about? Your shiur was not hurt by my shiur at all. Your shiur was hurt by a rock. Now, there's two ways to read this. Rashi says, what do you mean it was hurt by a rock? Like, as it was running away from Naomi's shiur, as it was running away from Ruth's shiur, Naomi's shiur tripped on a rock and broke its leg. So Rashi doesn't give that example. Rashi says, it was rubbing up against a stone and got hurt, which sounds like, again, it's not so clear from Rashi. It could be on account of running. It could be not on account of running. If you think that Rashi means not on account of running, that Ruth basically claims, what are you talking about? Your shiur was a totally different situation that caused, yeah, it's true, mine was chasing your shiur. But in the end, your shiur went up against a rock, got hurt from it, and it has nothing to do with me, which would mean that if that's what Rashi means, then what's the inference? Well, if Naomi's ox was running and tripped over a rock because Ruth was chasing it, right? That's indirect damage. But again, with indirect damage, there's always a debate, and there's a thing, how indirect? That's not so indirect. That's really caused by Ruth's animal because Ruth's animal was chasing it. So it could be that Naomi could claim damages in that case. Okay, that would be, so it's a good question here where we draw the line. Okay, but there's some line drawn, whether it was a rock not connected to my animal at all, or maybe even she claims it was a rock and not my animal, and therefore I'm not liable for damages. There's a big debate in the Rishonim about where we draw the line here. Any case, let's just take it as a base. Your shiur damaged or the rock damaged. Obviously, if the rock damaged, Ruth won't have to pay anything, and if the shiur damaged, she'll have to pay full damages. So, if Naomi wants to get money out of Ruth, the rules always are, this is the rule of thumb. Anyone who wants to take money out of someone's hands, the burden of proof is on them. So basically, Naomi's not going to get anything here because she has no way to prove what happened. If Ruth and Yael both had oxen that were chasing Naomi's shiur, and now in the end, all we know is that Naomi's shiur was damaged. We don't know by which one. We know that one of the shiurs did the damage. We just don't know which one. So Ruth says, Yael, it was yours. And and Yael says, what are you talking about, Ruth? It was yours. Shnehem ptulim. Moving now to Amud Bet. Both are exempt. Okay, because there's no way, again, we have no proof who did what. What if there were two oxen of Ruth's chasing Naomi's ox? Shnehem chayavim. This is a very weird language. What do you mean shnehem chayavim? What it means is really, no matter what, Ruth has to pay because one of her oxen caused the damage. We just don't know which one, but it doesn't make a difference. Either which way she has to pay. What it means both are liable, it's not clear. The Gemara is going to have to explain. We'll get to that later in tomorrow's class. Now we're continuing that case. There were two shiurs of Ruth's that attacked Naomi's shiur, or that were chasing it. But we don't know which one attacked. Only one of them attacked. Now, if it's a shiur tam, what happens? Ruth pays based on, right? We're going to have Ruth pays based on the animal itself. So if the animal was big, she'll end up paying a lot. If the animal was small and not equivalent to the amount of the damage, remember, let's say the damage is 50 and her animal's only worth 30, she'll only pay 30, right? If the half damage is 50 and her animal's only worth 30, she pays migufa. So we're going to have a debate now. If one of the animals of Ruth's was large and one was small, echad gadol ve'echad katan, hanizak omer, So Naomi claims gadol hizik because it's in her best interest. If the larger one attacked my animal, then Naomi will get a larger amount. Hamazik omer loki ala katan hizik. So Ruth says, what are you talking about? It was my small animal who damaged. Echad tam ve'echad muad. What if one was a short tam and one was a short muad? So now again, if it's a short tam, again, both animals chased Naomi's. We don't know who damaged. If it was the short tam, obviously Naomi's only going to get half damages. If it's the short muad, she's going to get full damages. So again, hanizak omer, Naomi claims muad hizik. Your muad animal hizik. I'm supposed to get full damages. V'hamazik omer loki ala tam hizik. And the mazik says, what are you talking about? It was my short tam that damaged. Again, hamotzi mechavero alav haraya. Naomi is not going to be able to get, now what do we assume this means? It means she's not going to be able to get the larger amount. I want you to remember this though. What does it seem like it's indicating? And we're going to talk about this later in the Mishna, in the Gemara. It seems though she at least can get the amount of the short tam, right? She'll get the minimum amount. Naomi, I hope I didn't confuse the names here. Naomi, when she goes to get paid, she can't get what she claims, which is it was your shor muad, but she can at least get half damages, because at least magia la that, okay? At least she's deserving of that. Now, another more complicated case. Hayu hanizakim shnaim. We now have 2 animals of Ruth's and 2 animals of Naomi's. So 2 animals of Ruth chased 2 animals of Naomi, and the assumption is one injured one and one injured the other. Echad gadol ve'echad katan. V'hamizikim shnaim. So the nizakim were shnaim, the ones who got damaged. Naomi had 2 who got damaged, and the mizikim were shnaim, echad gadol, echad katan. We're going to do this in gadol katan, and we're going to do it in tam and muad. So first gadol katan. So there were 2 large animals. There's one large animal and one small for Naomi. One large, one small for Ruth. Now, hanizak omer. So obviously, again, think about this. What's Naomi going to claim? Gadol hiziket hagadol. Your large one did the large one. Katan et hakatan. The small one did the small one, because then if she says the small one attacked my large animal, then she's only going to get the amount of the small animal. She's going to lose out. This is assuming they're all tam. Okay? So she's going to basically say the damage of the large was from a large animal. The damage of the small was the small. V'hamazik omer, Ruth says, what are you talking about? Loki ela katan et hagadol v'gadol et hakatan. The small one attacked your large one. So there you're only going to get up to the value of my small animal. And gadol et hakatan, anyway, you're going to have to pay for the katan. This reminds me of when you go and the store has a sale and it's 1 + 1, or it's one, you get buy one book and get the second 50% off. They'll never give it to you for the price, right? It's always the larger amount you have to pay. And then the lower amount you get the 50% off, or you get free, right? So if one book's, $20 and one book's $10, you're only going to get the $10 free. You're not going to, or 50% off the $10. It's like that. Echad tam ve'echad muad. If one shore is a short tam and one is a short muad, hanizak and so now it's obviously only roots or tam and muad. It's irrelevant if the nizak is tam or muad, but the nizak is gadol and katan. So now, again, figure it out. The nizak says, hanizak omer muad hiziket hagadol. It was a shor muad who did the big one, because she doesn't want to get 50% off the big one. She wants to save the 50% for the smaller one and get more money. Vitam et hakatan. And the small one, that one I'll get only 50% of the value. V'hamazik omer loki ela tam et hagadol. It's the small, right? It's the short tam that did your big one, because she wants to get out of paying full damages on the large shore, which is obviously worth more. Umuad et hakatan, and the muad was the one who did the katan, which anyway she'll have to pay the full value. Hamotzi mechavero alav haraya. So again, in order to get paid more money, right? That's what we're assuming this means. In order to get the higher amount, Naomi's going to have to prove it. If she has no proof, which she clearly has no proof here, she's not going to get it. Okay, so that's the general principle of this Mishna, which is a very basic principle that pervades throughout all of Seder Nezikin, this concept of hamotzi mechavero alav haraya. The burden of proof is on the person who's trying to get the money out of the other person. However, I made it sound like everybody agrees with this, to an extent. Amar Rabbi Chiya bar Abba, zot omeret, the fact that we have this Mishna, and it's according to the general opinion, you can infer from here that chalukim alav chaverav al Sumchus, that Sumchus' friends don't agree with him. Who's Sumchus? Very famous in Seder Nezikin, as you will see. Da'amal maman hamutal b'safek cholkim. He has a principle. that when you're not sure what to do with money, and this is a good case of we really don't know who's right or who's wrong, you split it 50-50. And the key case where it shows he's arguing with the rabbis is a case of a shul nagach para, okay, a shul gores a para. It's going to come up on Daf Mem Vav Amud Bet. Rashi quotes it here. He doesn't say, he just says it's a bright in the Gemara, b'shor shenagach et para. So now, here you have a shore that attacks a para. Now the para was pregnant, and then what you find next to the para, after the shore did the goring, is a dead fetus. Now, the big question is the fetus, was it dead before, or was it dead because of the goring? Now, there's no way to know because the fetus was inside and nobody knows whether the fetus was still alive before the goring or not. So there's a suffix about whether it happened because of the goring or not. Okay, we'll get into this case more in depth and understand the details better. But basically, that's where they have this debate. It's not exactly the same as ours because in this case, in that case, let's say with the ubar, there's no way to ascertain the truth. Nobody really knows on what caused the death of the fetus. But in our case, so there, Sumchus says we split the ubar 50-50. And the rabbis say, no, if the owner of the para, of the cow, wants to get the money, they have to prove it, which means basically they can't prove it, they don't get anything. Now, what they say here is that Sumchus would argue, what they're basically trying to say is, it's clear that Sumchus would think in our case as well, mamona mutal b'safek cholkin, which means we split it 50-50. And in our case also, right, he would say we split it 50-50. We don't know. Let's go back to case number one. Is it Naomi? Is it when Naomi's shore is dead now, and Ruth's shore was chasing it? We don't know if it was Ruth, or we don't know if it was the stone, right? That there was some rock there, and maybe it was because of the rock. So now, according to the rabbis, Naomi gets nothing because she can't prove it. According to Sumchus, according to, again, Rabbi Chiya bar Abba, Sumchus would agree here that mamona mutal b'safek cholkin. And from here we see the rabbis disagree with him, okay? Because the rabbis say no. Okay, now, Sumchus obviously doesn't think in every case of safek mamon we split it 50-50 because that's very dangerous. It means that you could basically come into my house, pick up an item and say, hey, this is mine. Bring me to court, and then I have to give you 50%, right? That would be insane. Anyone could just claim anything, and there would be this splitting of it. That would be totally unfair. So we have to draw a line somewhere in Sumchus, but the question is, where does he draw the line? So they say this case, they assume also that Sumchus would disagree in this case, and Sumchus would think it's 50-50 here, and from there you see the rabbis disagree with him because they don't think it's 50-50. They think Naomi really gets nothing until she can prove it. So now, Amarle, Rabbi Abba bar Mama, Rabbi Chiya bar Abba. Oh, so I just wanted to point out, I didn't say this explicitly. In our case, it's different because, and that's why there's a jump to say that Sumchus would agree in our case. In the case of the ubar, nobody really knows the truth. There's no way to ascertain the truth. In this case, right, if we had cameras or, right, somebody knows the truth, okay? Or someone could potentially know the truth. It's just in the court right now, we don't know because he claims this and he claims that, or she claims this, she claims that. We don't know. It's a different kind of suffix, okay? And it's even more different kind of suffix than you coming into my house and taking my item, right? There has to be some sort of, at least here, there's some sort of proof that there's two sides because the shore was chasing the other one. There is some sort of evidence, but it's not clear which way it goes. So we could see that maybe we'd split it 50-50. But whereas, and then we go to an extreme where there's no proof whatsoever for your claim, then you're not going to be able to get 50%. So now, right, again, I'm being very unclear about the definitions because it's unclear. There's a scale here of how we define exactly where we're going to say it or not. But the big chiddush of Rabbi Chiya bar Abba is that Sumchus would say it here as well, and not just in a case where it's an unknown suffix where we'll never be able to figure it out. Because then you could see, by the way, splitting something 50-50 when there's no way to know the truth. Here, it could be someone's lying. Now, that's what they're going to get to right now. So Rabbi Abba bar Mama, Rabbi Abba bar Mama, Rabbi Chiya bar Abba. So Rabbi Chiya bar Abba makes a statement that our Mishna is like Sumchus and is not like Sumchus, and you can see Sumchus would disagree in our Mishna. There's a machlok. Amar Sumchus afilu bari. Would Sumchus agree that in a case now, here we get into a whole other thing, which we're going to, like I said, we're going to see a lot more coming in other cases. There's what's called bari and shema. You can go to court and make a bari claim. That means you go into court and say, I know this is the case. Or you could come into court and say, maybe this is the case. Now, it wasn't clear in our Mishnah what the situation was. We kept saying in all the cases, right? Oh, Naomi will say this because it's in her best interest, right? But is she saying it? Maybe it was my short time that killed your big one, and maybe it was my short muad who killed your small one? Or is she saying, I know it was my short muad who killed your small one, and I know it was my short time that killed your big one? There's a difference, and we're going to talk about the differences now. So Rabbi Abba bar Mama says to Rabbi Chiya bar Abba, would Sumchus say even in a bari when both come with definitive claims? Now, what's the difference? If each one comes with maybe this, maybe that, so you could see Cholkim, right? Sumchus would say, okay, let's split it 50-50. Nobody really knows what the truth is. But if he says, I'm sure, and he says, I'm sure, then it's already more tricky to say we split it 50-50, because why? Because one of them is definitely lying, okay? And we just don't know who's lying. So what we're going to give the liar, let him win out by getting 50% of something that he's not really deserving of. Okay, so let's take it to our case. So now he says, Amar le'in. He says, yes, Amar Sumchus afilu bari. Sumchus even thinks in a case where both come with definitive claims, we split it 50-50. So now they say, well, umimai demanitim bari. How do you know our Mishnah is bari? To which Rabbi Chiya bar Abba says the following: Tikatane, listen to the language. Ze omer shorcha hizik, v'ze omer lo ki ela sela. Right. So Naomi said, your ox gored. And Ruth replies, no, it's because of the rock. Now, that sounds like a very definitive claim. That doesn't sound like maybe. So therefore, they assume our Mishnah is bari right now. But then they're going to say there's a problem with saying our Mishnah is bari. Maybe the first case could be a bari. But if you say the first case is, again, bari means this one's definitive and that one's definitive in their claim. Again, where maybe there's less likelihood Sumchus would even say that you split it 50-50 because someone's obviously lying. As opposed to if each one says, maybe it was your rock, maybe it was your animal, and then they don't know, and then we could see why you would split 50-50. But again, Rabbi Chiya bar Abba thinks even bari. But now we're going to question that. How could you say our Mishnah is bari? Ema Seifa, it says in the second part of the Mishnah, Hayacha gadol ve'echad katan, nizak omer gadol hizik, umazik omer lo ki ela katan hizik, or echad tam echad muad, nizak omer muad hizik, v'mazik omer lo ki ela tam hizik, hamotzi mechaber alav haray. Let's just review that case. I read it quickly, but we already learned it. Again, 2 shvarim killed 2 shvarim. We don't know who killed which one killed which. So again, each one claims that they're going to either get more money or get less or pay less money. So let's just go with the gadol and katan. So Naomi says it was the large one it was my small one who attacked your, Naomi is the nizak. She says it was your large one who attacked my large one. And Ruth says, no, it was my small one that attacked your large one because Ruth wants to pay less money. Now, if you assume the first part is bari, we have to assume the second part is bari. That's just an assumption because it wouldn't shift gears entirely in the middle of the Mishnah. So now, what is the law there? The law is if they each make definitive claims, right? So again, what does that mean? Naomi is not going to be able to get unless she can prove. So what can she get though? Right? It's not clear, but we made this inference. If she can't bring proof that it was the big animal that attacked her big animal, then shakil keda'amar mazik. Then at least she'll get what Ruth said, right? She'll at least get Ruth's short time killed her big animal, so she'll at least get half damages for the big animal and full damages for the small. Everyone agrees with that, right? That seems pretty clear. Well, that's going to create a problem with a statement that Rabbi bar Natan makes. Why? Rabbi bar Natan said the following, and I want you to think outside for a minute, and then we'll compare it to this case. If you claim I owe you wheat, and I say, I don't owe you wheat. Okay, you claim I gave you wheat to watch and you never gave it back to me. You owe me wheat. And I say, what are you talking about? You gave me barley and I have the barley, but I don't have wheat. I'm exempt. Why am I exempt? This is a fascinating halacha. Because you don't claim that I owe you barley. It's like as if we're talking about two totally different things and you don't even have a claim on me when it comes to the barley. You claim wheat, not barley. So now, and that's a bari case. If you're definitive that I owe you wheat and I say I definitely owe you barley, then I actually don't have to pay you anything. Now, there's a big question why this is. The commentaries, some people view it as that you're admitting that I don't owe you because you're saying I didn't claim barley, so you definitely don't owe me barley, or because maybe you're mochel me, you're saying I don't want the barley, like I'm not interested in barley, I want wheat, and you're not giving me wheat. Remember, barley's worth less than wheat. So anyway, he claims if I claim one thing and you claim something different, okay, not a smaller amount of the same thing, but something different, I'm actually exempt. So now that's all in a bari claim. If our Mishnah is bari and Ruth claims it was the shor tam and not the shor muad, and Naomi claims it was the shor muad and not the shor tam, then they're talking apples and oranges. Basically, she's saying it wasn't your shor tam who killed my big ox. So don't pay me half damages for the ox. Don't pay me anything, because she's basically saying that's not what I claimed. And if it's all definitive claims, then that goes against Rabbi Bar Natan. Okay, so that can't be. So the Mishnah can't be bari. So now we have to start again, and we have to say, then what's the case of our Mishnah? Ela bari v'shema. It must be one had a definitive claim, and one had. So basically, just to make it clear, because of Rabbi Bar Natan, when you're doing apples and oranges, and one claims apples and the other says oranges, which basically shor muad and shor tam, or shor gadol and shor katan are apples and oranges. Especially, by the way, if you say in a short time you get the shor, like you're arguing over something totally different, you're not going to get anything. Now, in our Mishnah, again, it never said you get something, but we assumed when it says that if Naomi has no proof, she won't be able to get the higher amount, but she will obviously get the lower amount. So it must not be it's a bari claim, because a bari claim would then lead us to Rabbi Bar Natan's din, which would say Naomi would get nothing. And that's not the way we understand our Mishnah. So in order to resolve it, the Mishnah is going to say, the Gemara is going to say, Ela b'bari v'shem. It must be one was definitive and one was in doubt, right? One wasn't sure. Now, Kamma bari man, Kamma shema man. So which one was definitive? Which one was the suffix? If you want to say that Naomi was definitive in her claim, I know, let's go back to case one. I know that it was your shore that damaged mine. And Ruth says, maybe it was a stone. Okay. It would still be the same problem, because in the end, Naomi's claiming something and Ruth is not admitting to it. Okay. It can't be, because in the end, well, it would have to be, right, sorry. It would have to be, we're talking about in the case of, one second. Sorry, I made a mistake. In the latter case, in the case where it's the shor tam and the shor muad, okay? And Naomi is saying, I know it was your big ox that attacked my big ox. And Ruth says, maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was my small ox, okay? Then if Ruth says maybe it was this, then in the end, we still can't make Ruth pay the lower amount, because that's not what Naomi wants. Naomi's claiming, I know it's the bigger amount. So she doesn't want the smaller amount almost, right? That's what Rabbi Bar Natan would say. They're claiming apples and oranges. So that wouldn't help us. So it must be, it must be, Ruth said, I know it was my small animal that attacked your large animal. And then Naomi said, maybe it wasn't. Then we could give Naomi the smaller amount, because then, okay, the other part was hard for you to understand. This makes perfect sense. We can say, look, Naomi, you're claiming maybe it was more, but you don't really know. So at least you'll get the half amount, because you're not sure. You don't know. You're just saying, maybe I'm deserving of more. And then the answer is, well, we'll just give you what, at least what Ruth's definitive claim is. You'll get that, but you're not going to get any more than that. Now, but here comes a problem. Mi deseifa nizak shema umazik bari, reisha nami nizak shema v'mazik bari. Now, if whatever we say for this part, we're going to have to say for the beginning part again. That's how we started, right? If we say that's bari, this doesn't make sense. It's bari. Okay, so now this is shema v'bari. And in this order, we're going to assume the reisha is in the same order. Now, something's not going to make sense here, because Amar Sumchus afilu bahadi itzrich lashminan delo. The rabbis are coming, basically, they're assuming to go against Sumchus. Now, if in the reisha, the nizak was shema and Ruth was bari. So Ruth says, I know it was the rock that did it. And Naomi says, maybe it was your shore. Now, Sumchus is not going to say in that case, when Ruth comes with a definitive claim and Naomi comes with a suffix claim, we're going to say if Naomi wants to get money, she's going to have to prove against Ruth's definitive claim. And here we're going to say, right, basically, how could Sumchus possibly say Naomi will get 50%? Because she says, maybe the rock did it. I'm sorry, maybe your ox did it. When Ruth says, I know it was the rock, and Naomi says, maybe your ox, she can't get 50% based on a claim like that. No way, no how. So that doesn't make any sense. To which the Gemara answers, no. Seifa nizak shema umazik bari, reisha nizak bari v'mazik shema. We're going to flip the reisha and seifa. One is this one shema, that one's bari. That one's bari, that one's shema. We're just going to switch the order, meaning in the reisha, it's Naomi who says, I know you're sure did it. And then Ruth said, maybe it was a rock. For that, we're going to say, okay, and Sumchus is going to say 50-50. Okay, then Sumchus could say 50-50, but not in the reverse case. So to which the Gemara says, but that was that we started with the problem. We tried to say one is bari and bari, and the other can't be bari or bari. Now we're going to say one is bari b'shema this way, one is bari b'shema that way. Didn't we just say the Mishna has to be all the same? To which they say, Amri, bari b'shema bari chad milti. Bari v'bari, shema v'bari, trey miltini. No, you can't have a Mishnah that one case is she's definitive and she's definitive, and the other case is one's definitive and one's questionable, one's not sure. But you can have a case where one's definitive and one's not, but flip it. Those are already parallel cases. That's similar enough that we could have that kind of thing, but we can't have one bari and bari, one bari and shema. Those are two totally different types of claims. Okay, now we'll do a little bit more to finish up this next section, which is now we're going to go into what Rabbi Barnata did. So what we did in this section, just to review before we go on, we already reviewed the first part of the daf. Now we're going to review the second part, which is we had all these separate cases. And then in the Gemara, we assume that Sumchus disagrees and Sumchus thinks 50-50, and the rabbis are coming to argue with him and say, no, across the board. Then we had to figure out, is it bari? We said, no, it can't be. It doesn't make sense in light of what Rabbi Barnatan said. And then we resolved it by saying it's bari is shema. And we had one case is this direction, one case is the other direction. And that resolved everything. Now they're going to go into Rabbi Barnatan and kind of raise the same kind of questions we already asked and respond to them. Rabbi Barnatan says, that's what he said already, we learned. So first we have this other question, which is, what's he teaching us? It already says this, Tanina, in a Mishnah. The Mishnah is in Shvuot. Now, the Mishnah is really talking about oaths. There's an oath called Moda b'miktzad. If I admit to half the claim you're making, I have to take an oath in court to say that I'm right about this half claim. If not, I have to pay you the whole thing. But if ta'anochi tim v'odalo b'seorim patur, this is called a hoda'ah shelomi min hata'ana. I'm not admitting to half of what you said. I'm admitting that instead of wheat, I owe you barley. That's something different. Patur. I don't take a shvuat moda b'miktzad here because I'm not actually admitting to half of what you said. And the assumption here is if I'm exempt from taking an oath, I'm also exempt from paying. So that's basically what Rabbi Barnatan said. Why would Rabbi Barnatan say something it says explicitly in the Mishnah? To which they say, if you had it from there, you might have thought, I don't pay the chitim, but I do actually have to pay the seolim that I claim I owe you. Kamashmalan comes Rabbi Barnatan to say, no, you're patur legamre, which is the way we understood him. You don't pay anything, to which they now question it from our Mishnah, the way we said before. Tanan, hayu anizakim shnayim, if there were two animals who damaged, echad gadol, echad katan, etc., etc. Now, again, what does it say there? Hamotzi mechaber alav haraya. Ha lo ma'iteraya shakel kedamra mazik. Amai chitim usorim ninhu. They say it sounds like if you didn't bring a proof, right, then you would at least get the lower claim, even though it's not what they were claiming. It's apples and oranges. To which they answer a different answer than we said before. Ra'oi litol, meaning Rashi says, if you brought proof, then you could claim it. Ve'ein lo, but forget that inference we said. Now they throw that inference out the door. They say, ve'ein lo, you actually, Naomi can't get anything in that case. Because according to Rabbi Barnata will read our Mishnah and say, you actually don't get anything. Okay, we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to stop here. Oh, one last question. V'hatanya, but wait, there's a Tosefta about this that says, what do you mean Naomi doesn't get anything? It says in a Braita, in the Tosefta, she gets the small amount for the big one and the larger one for the small one, meaning Naomi will get less money, but at least she'll get money. So the answer, ditafas. That's only if Naomi grab the animals for herself. And that's another whole concept that we've discussed at other occasions, and we'll discuss a lot more, that once you've already claimed it and it's in your possession, then Ruth will have the burden of proof on her to release it. Then you'll get the lower amount. But actually, they claim that according to Rabbi Bernatan, you won't actually be able, if Naomi went into court to claim, she wouldn't be able to claim anything because of this, because it's apples and oranges. She actually can't get anything, even though theoretically she's obviously deserving of some money, which becomes a very interesting case. Okay, we'll talk about this more tomorrow because we'll do the exact same thing with the second part of the Mishnah, so it'll be a good review. Okay, wishing everybody a good day, hoping for good news, and happy Hanukkah to everybody starting tonight.